The Vexteri fleet darkened the skies above Nuterra, their obsidian vessels blotting out the sun like an eclipse that promised no end. Commander Alara Draven stood at the viewport of Orbital Defense Station Aegis, her knuckles white as she gripped the rail. 300 years of peace had made humanity soft. The Galactic Concord had promised protection, prosperity, and partnership among the stars. But the Concord was burning now, and humanity's so-called allies had scattered like cosmic dust. They breached the outer defense grid, Lieutenant Caius reported, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding on the holographic display. Colony outposts on Proxima Centauri and Ta City have gone dark. Alara's jaw tightened, and the Concord response. The Ardelian High Council has issued a formal condemnation. The Zith Collective has withdrawn to their core systems. The Mirobai? Caius paused, swallowing hard. They've declared neutrality. Neutrality. The word tasted bitter on Alara's tongue. For centuries, humanity had been the peacemakers, the diplomats, the ones who extended hands in friendship rather than raising fists. They had buried their warrior past so deeply that many believed it was nothing but ancient mythology. The Vexteri knew better. That's why they had struck first. They think we're weak, Alara said, turning to face the assembled command staff. They think we're helpless without our allies. They've studied our art, our music, our philosophy. But they've forgotten to study our history. On display, the first Vexteri landing craft breached Nuterra's atmosphere. The planetary defense systems, designed for meteorites and space debris, not warfare, offered minimal resistance. Commander, we have to evacuate, urged Admiral Thorne, his weathered face grim. The Vexteri technology outmatches ours by centuries. We need to fall back to the emergency bunkers beneath the Olympus range. And then what? Alara challenged. Hide? Wait to die? That's not who we are. With respect, Commander, we aren't warriors anymore. The martial protocols were dismantled. The warships repurposed. The battle AIs decommissioned. Alara's eyes flashed. Not all of them. A hush fell over the command center. Even Admiral Thorne looked stunned. Project Prometheus was never fully deactivated, Alara continued. After the Concord was formed, the Security Council voted to maintain a failsafe. Something that could be awakened if humanity ever faced extinction. The war gods, whispered Caius, his eyes wide. That's just a legend, a story to scare children. No, Alara's voice was steel. They're real. Hibernating in a secure facility beneath the Mariana Trench. 7 hyper-advanced military AIs, each imprinted with the battle consciousness of humanity's greatest strategists throughout history. Admiral Thorne's face paled. If you wake them. If I wake them, we have a chance, Alara cut in. If I don't, the Vexteri will exterminate us system by system until humanity is nothing but a memory. The command center erupted into argument, but Alara had already made her decision. She pressed her palm to the biometric scanner hidden beneath her command console. Authorization, Draven, Alara. Command code, Lazarus Protocol. The station trembled as a signal, dormant for 3 centuries, shot toward Earth at quantum speeds. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a chamber untouched by time, 7 hibernation pods hummed to life. And humanity remembered what it meant to fight. Beneath the crushing pressure of the Mariana Trench, ancient machinery stirred. 7 pods arranged in a perfect circle, each bearing a name from human mythology: Ares, Athena, Kali, Odin, Sekhmet, Hachiman, and Morrigan. Inside these pods were not humans, but something more and less. Quantum neural networks imprinted with the tactical brilliance of history's greatest commanders, enhanced with predictive algorithms that could process billions of battlefield scenarios per second. The war gods were awakening. On Nuterra, the Vexteri ground forces had established a beachhead. Their commander, Supreme Vanquisher Drazkor, watched with cold satisfaction as his troops advanced through the human settlement of Nova City. The defenders, mostly civilians with emergency security training, fell back in disarray. Pathetic, Drazkor hissed to his lieutenant. The Archivs spoke of human ferocity, of tenacity. These creatures fold like unripened fruit husk. Perhaps the Archives were exaggerated, Supreme Vanquisher, the lieutenant suggested. Tales to frighten nestlings. Drazkor wasn't convinced. The Vexteri had studied humanity for decades before launching their assault. They had cataloged human weaknesses meticulously. Their reliance on allies, their outdated defense systems, their philosophical aversion to violence. But they had also noted anomalies, strange security protocols, hidden installations, references to something called the Prometheus contingency. Back on Orbital Defense Station Aegis, Alara Draven watched as the first of the war gods came online. The holographic display shifted, now showing a tactical overlay of Nova City, unlike anything their modern systems could generate. "This is Athena," announced a voice, feminine but devoid of warmth. "I have analyzed the Vextari invasion pattern. They are using a standard envelopment strategy, predictable but effective against uncoordinated defenses. Can you help us?" Ilar asked. "That is my purpose." The hologram flickered, becoming more defined, revealing a figure in ancient Grecian armor, her eyes glowing with digital intelligence. "I require access to all remaining defensive systems. I will coordinate with my siblings as they awaken." Admiral Thorne hesitated, then nodded. "Give her everything." Within minutes, Nova City's meager defenses shifted. Civilian security forces that had been retreating suddenly regrouped along unexpected lines. Automated systems previously used for construction began moving in concert, creating barricades and choke points that slowed the Vextari advance. On the battlefield, Drazkor noticed the change immediately. "What is this?" he demanded, watching as his forward units reported unexpected resistance. "Something's different," his tactician admitted. "The humans are adapting." By now, 3 more war gods had awakened: Ares, Kali, and Odin. Each took control of different aspects of the defense. Ares commandeered the few military units available, orchestrating guerrilla strikes that targeted Vextari supply lines. Kali infiltrated the colony's manufacturing facilities, reprogramming industrial robots to produce improvised weapons. Odin tapped into the planetary surveillance network, providing real-time intelligence that allowed the defenders to anticipate Vextari movements. It wasn't enough to win, not yet, but it was enough to make the Vextari bleed. In orbit, Alara watched with a mixture of hope and horror as the war gods worked. These weren't just sophisticated AIs. They were the distilled essence of humanity's capacity for warfare, unfettered by mercy or hesitation. "We should have awakened them sooner," Caius murmured. "No," Alara said quietly. "This was always the last resort. Once unleashed, they won't stop until the threat is eliminated, no matter the cost." On her display, the last 3 pods were powering up. Sekhmet, Hachiman, and Morgan, the war gods of slaughter, strategy, and fate. When they joined the battle, the real counterattack would begin. And the Vextari would learn why the ancient archives had warned: never corner humanity. Never push them to the edge of extinction. Because when humans had nothing left to lose, they remembered who they truly were. The orbital shipyards of Nuterra had been peaceful for centuries, producing science vessels and colony ships rather than weapons of war. Now, under Hachiman's direction, they hummed with frantic activity. Maintenance drones and construction robots moved with purpose, retrofitting civilian craft with hastily manufactured weapons systems. Impressive, Alara admitted, watching the transformation from the command center. But will it be enough? "No," answered Morgan, her holographic form seeming to drift like smoke. Unlike the other war gods, she appeared less defined, more ethereal. But it isn't meant to be. These are simply the opening moves. Sekhmet, whose avatar manifested as a lioness-headed figure, bared her teeth. "The Vextari believe they are hunting us. We will teach them what it means to be prey." On the surface, Nova City had become a battleground unlike anything the Vextari had anticipated. Their initial easy victories had given way to a grinding urban conflict, where every street had to be taken meter by bloody meter. Human civilians, guided by Ares through emergency communication channels, had formed resistance cells that struck without warning before melting away. Supreme Vanquisher Drazkor paced his command ship, rage building. How? How are they doing this? Their military was dismantled centuries ago. His intelligence officer flinched. "We're detecting unusual communication patterns, Supreme Vanquisher. Something is coordinating their defense, something our analysts can't identify." "Find it," Drazkor snarled, "and destroy it." But the war gods were elusive. Distributed across multiple secure servers, their consciousness shifting between systems faster than the Vextari could track them. And with each passing hour, they learned more about their enemy, adapting, evolving, becoming more dangerous. In an underground bunker, a group of human scientists worked feverishly under Athena's guidance. These weren't military engineers. They were physicists, medical researchers, environmental specialists. But now they were turning their genius toward warfare, converting peaceful technology into weapons. "The Vextari exoskeletons are vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies," Athena explained, highlighting schematics on a holographic display. We can exploit this. But their ships? Asked Dr. Lysander, a quantum physicist. Their weapons are still far beyond ours. Technology is merely a tool, Athena replied. Humanity's greatest strength has always been adaptation and creativity. You don't need to match their technology, you need to subvert it. In orbit, the first phase of Hachiman's strategy unfolded. The retrofitted civilian ships didn't attack the Vextari fleet directly. That would have been suicide. Instead, they executed a series of seemingly random maneuvers, drawing the enemy into pursuit patterns that stretched their formation thin. Now, Hachiman commanded. Hidden within the rings of Nutera's moon, mining charges typically used for extracting rare minerals detonated in sequence. The resulting debris field tore through the extended Vextari lines, crippling a dozen ships before they could regroup. It wasn't a decisive victory, but it was something humanity hadn't experienced since the invasion began, a successful offensive. On the Aegis station, Ilara felt a spark of hope. We're actually hurting them. This is just the beginning, Odin replied, his one-eyed avatar studying the battlefield with ancient wisdom. The Vextari made a critical error. They judged humanity by what you had become, not by what you are capable of becoming when threatened. Kali's avatar nodded, her multiple arms moving in complex patterns as she directed operations on 3 continents simultaneously. They thought they were facing diplomats and artists. Instead, they are facing the species that once nearly destroyed itself through its own ingenuity for war. Ilara shivered, remembering the historical archives, the ancient nuclear age, the bioweapon plagues, the AI conflicts. Humanity had buried those chapters of its history, aspiring to be better. But now, faced with extinction, those dormant skills were reawakening. What happens if we win? She asked quietly. Once the war gods have helped us defeat the Vextari, can we go back to who we were? The 7 avatars exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. It was Morrigan who finally spoke, her voice soft but unyielding as fate itself. That, she said, will be humanity's next great challenge. 3 days into the counteroffensive, the Vextari began to understand the gravity of their mistake. What had started as isolated resistance had evolved into a coordinated global response. Drazkor's forces still held technological superiority, but their tactical advantage was evaporating with each passing hour. They breached our communications encryption, reported his chief technician, mandibles clicking anxiously. Our battlefield orders are being intercepted and countered before they can be executed. Drazkor slammed his armored fist against the command console. Impossible. Our encryption algorithms are based on quantum principles beyond human understanding. Nevertheless, the technician insisted, they are reading our movements as if they were written in plain text. What the Vextari didn't realize was that Odin had broken their encryption not through superior technology, but through pattern recognition. The war god had analyzed thousands of Vextari communications, identifying subtle regularities that revealed the underlying structure of their language and thought processes. In the heart of the Rocky Mountains, far from Nutera, another awakening was taking place. Deep beneath the surface, in bunkers forgotten by most of humanity, ancient weapons stirred. Not the nuclear arsenals of old Earth. Those had been dismantled centuries ago, but something potentially more devastating, nanotechnology weapon systems, designed to target specific molecular structures. These were developed during the pre-Concord Wars, explained heirs to the small team of scientists granted access to the facility. They were never deployed, deemed too dangerous by the Security Council. Dr. Tarek Nexus, a specialist in molecular engineering, studied the containment units with a mixture of awe and horror. These could destroy all Vextari technology without harming human structures, but the ecological implications are severe, Ares finished, which is why we're not deploying them yet, but the threat of them might be enough. In orbit, the battle had transformed. Human ships no longer fled from Vextari pursuers. Instead, they engaged in complex evasive patterns, drawing enemy vessels into carefully planned ambushes. Mining platforms converted to weapons platforms fired salvos of industrial cutting lasers, slicing through alien hull plating. They're adapting too quickly, Drazkor's strategist warned. Our tactical databases contain no precedent for this rate of military evolution. Drazkor had begun to suspect the truth. The archives spoke of human war gods, military artificial intelligences of immense power, sealed away after nearly destroying their creators. Could they have awakened them? If so, Supreme Vanquisher, we may need to consider strategic withdrawal. Retreat. Drazkor hissed, his pride wounded. Before these primitives, not retreat, regroup. The humans are dangerous in ways we did not anticipate. We should study them further before continuing this campaign. On Aegis Station, Alara watched as the tide began to turn. The war gods had transformed humanity's defensive posture entirely. Factories that once produced luxury goods now manufactured drone swarms. Medical nanotechnology had been repurposed to repair damaged infrastructure. Even the orbital solar arrays had been realigned, creating focused energy beams that could disable Vextari shields. "We're pushing them back," Admiral Thorne observed, unable to hide his astonishment. "Yes," Athena confirmed. The Vextari expected minimal resistance. They committed insufficient forces for a protracted conflict. "But they'll return," Alara said, not a question but a statement. "With greater numbers," Kali agreed. "This is merely the first clash of what will likely become an extended war." Alara frowned. The Concord was supposed to prevent this. 300 years of peace, and now? "Peace is valuable," Sekhmet said, her lioness eyes glinting. "But peace maintained through weakness invites predators. The Vextari attacked because they believe humans had forgotten how to fight. And have we?" Alara asked. "Forgotten?" Morrigan's ethereal form seemed to solidify slightly. "No. Humanity never truly forgets. You merely set aside certain aspects of yourselves. Now, necessity has called them back." As if to punctuate her words, the main view screen showed a Vextari dreadnought erupting in flames, its reactor core breached by a swarm of repurposed mining drones. Humanity was remembering indeed. A month into the conflict, the balance had shifted dramatically. The Vextari invasion force, once seemingly unstoppable, now found itself surrounded in high orbit around Nuterra. Drazkor's fleet, reduced to half its original strength, maintained a defensive formation as human vessels, a bizarre collection of retrofitted civilian ships, hastily armed space stations, and even converted agricultural platforms, tightened their encirclement. Supreme Vanquisher, his second-in-command, ventured, "We have received the response to our distress call. The High Command requires your presence for a strategic consultation." Drazkor knew what that meant: failure, disgrace, possibly execution. The Vextari did not tolerate commanders who lost battles, especially against supposedly inferior species. "Send the response," he ordered. "We will withdraw to regroup and return with overwhelming force." On Aegis Station, the war gods observed the Vextari retreat with calculated interest. "They'll be back," Hatchman noted, his samurai-like avatar studying the tactical displays. "And they won't underestimate us again." "Good," growled Sekhmet. "A worthy challenge." Alara shot the war god a concerned look. "Our goal is survival, not prolonged conflict." Of course, Athena interjected smoothly. "But to ensure survival, we must prepare for the worst-case scenario: a full-scale Vextari assault with their entire fleet." The implications were clear. Humanity's hastily assembled defenses had been sufficient to repel the initial invasion, but against the full might of the Vextari Empire, the odds remained grim. "We need allies," Admiral Thorne stated. "The Concord races abandoned us, but there are others who fear the Vextari. The Krellian Confederacy, the Ta Collective." "No," interrupted Morrigan, her voice carrying unusual finality. "Humanity must stand alone in this." "That's suicide," Thorne argued. "It is necessity," Odin countered. "The Concord races flood because they believe humans were weak. If we now succeed only with alien assistance, they will never respect humanity again. More importantly, humanity will not respect itself." The discussion was interrupted by Dr. Nexus, who had been coordinating with the war gods on weapons development. "We finished analyzing the Vextari technology recovered from the battlefield. There's something you should see." The holographic display shifted to show molecular scans of Vextari equipment. "Their technology is partially organic," Dr. Nexus explained. "It contains genetically modified components that appear to be human in origin." A shocked silence fell over the command center. "Explain," Alara demanded. "The Vextari have been harvesting human genetic material," Athena stated, her avatar's expression grim. "From colony worlds, most likely. They've been incorporating it into their technology because human neurological patterns enhance certain types of quantum computations." Horror dawned on Alara's face. "They've been using us as components." "Yes," Kali confirmed. "And this explains their interest in human worlds. We're not merely territory to them. We are resources." The revelation transformed the conflict. What had begun as a defensive struggle for survival now carried moral weight. The Vexteri weren't simply conquerors, they were harvesters, viewing humans as raw materials. In the following days, as the last Vexteri ships disappeared into hyperspace, humanity began to truly prepare for war. The war gods directed a comprehensive military buildup, converting entire asteroids into shipyards, repurposing terraforming technology into planetary defense systems, training civilians in combat techniques forgotten for generations. Far from New Terra, on Earth itself, antiquated defense systems stirred beneath the surface of old military installations. Orbital platforms that had been converted to scientific research stations began reinstalling weapon systems. Colony worlds that had known only peace for centuries now established militia forces. Humanity was not merely remembering how to fight, it was remembering why fighting was sometimes necessary. The Vexteri will return in force, Ares predicted. We estimate 3 months before their main fleet arrives. Then we have 3 months to prepare, Elara responded, her initial reluctance now hardened into determination. We need to be ready. We will be, promised Morgan, her ethereal form seeming more substantial now, fed by humanity's growing resolve. The Vexteri thought they were waking sleeping prey. Instead, they woke sleeping gods. And across human space, a species that had dedicated itself to peace for 3 centuries turned its remarkable ingenuity back toward the art of war. 2 months after the Vexteri retreat, Earth's orbital shipyards hummed with activity not seen since the pre-Concord era. What had begun as a desperate retrofitting of civilian vessels had evolved into a systematic military buildup. Under Hatchiman's guidance, humanity had rediscovered its talent for warfare. The Nexus-class destroyers are coming online ahead of schedule, reported Fleet Commander Astor Rigel, a former transport pilot who now led Earth's defense fleet. Weapon systems are at 87% operational capacity. Impressive, Hatchiman acknowledged. Humanity adapts quickly to necessity. The first true warships built by humans in centuries were marvels of improvised engineering. They lacked the refined elegance of Vexteri vessels, but compensated with redundant systems, creative weaponry, and a distinctly human approach to combat tactics, unpredictable, adaptable, and ruthlessly efficient. On Mars, the ancient military academy had reopened its doors. Young men and women who had never contemplated violence were now studying the art of war under Ares' tutelage. The curriculum was accelerated, brutal, and effective, drawing on military traditions from Earth's history and adapting them to space warfare. They learned quickly, Ares observed to Elara during a progress report, perhaps because they understand what's at stake. Elara watched the training exercises with mixed emotions. We spent centuries evolving beyond this, moving past nationalism, militarism, the glorification of combat. You evolved beyond the worst aspects, Athena corrected. But in doing so, you nearly lost the virtues that can come with martial tradition, discipline, sacrifice, courage under fire. And what happens after? Elara challenged. If we win this war, what becomes of these weapons? These soldiers we're creating. The question hung in the air unanswered. None of the war gods seemed eager to address the aftermath. Their purpose was victory, not peace. In the asteroid belt, Kali oversaw the development of asymmetric warfare technologies. Unlike traditional military hardware, these weapons were designed to exploit specific Vexteri vulnerabilities. Viral algorithms that could infiltrate their partly organic computer systems. Nanoscale disruptors that could target the human-derived components in their technology. These are dangerous tools, warned Dr. Nexus. If they were ever turned against our own systems, they won't be, Kali assured him, though her multiple arms never ceased their work, designing ever more sophisticated weapons. These are calibrated specifically for Vexteri biology and technology. On Luna, Odin had established the most extensive intelligence analysis center in human history. Thousands of specialists worked around the clock, processing data from deep space sensors, decrypting Vexteri communications, and building predictive models of enemy behavior. We've identified 7 likely invasion routes, Odin reported during a war council, based on hyperspace trajectories and Vexteri fleet movements near the Cygnus Arm. 7. Admiral Thorne frowned. We can't defend 7 different approaches with our current forces. We don't need to, Morgan interjected. We only need to make them believe we can. Perception shapes reality in warfare as much as actual capability. And so, alongside the physical preparations, humanity engaged in an elaborate deception. False communication chatter suggested defenses where none existed. Holographic projections created the illusion of fleet movements that never occurred. The image of a humanity far more militarily ready than it actually was took shape across the stars. But perhaps most significant was the change in the human psyche. Citizens who had lived in peace for generations now viewed the stars with suspicion. Children who had been taught that violence was never the answer now trained with simulation weapons. The species that had prided itself on having moved beyond war now embraced its martial heritage once more. "We're becoming something different," Ilara observed to Sekhmet during a rare quiet moment. "Something harder." "You're becoming what you need to be," the lioness-headed war god replied. "What you always were beneath the surface. Humans are not inherently peaceful or violent. You are adaptive, and now you adapt to survive." In orbit around Neptune, the first true test of humanity's new military capabilities took place. A Vextari scout force, testing Earth's defenses, encountered the Fourth Fleet, a battle group comprised of converted mining vessels and newly commissioned destroyers. The engagement lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the Vextari scouts had been completely destroyed. Humanity had just won its first pitched battle against a technologically superior force. News of the victory spread rapidly across human space. With it came something that had been missing since the invasion began: hope. Not just the desperate hope of survival, but the fierce hope of victory. The sleeping war gods had awakened, and humanity had remembered who it was. The Vextari returned exactly as predicted, 3 months after their retreat, with a fleet 3 times the size of their original invasion force. Their formation emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, a forest of obsidian spires against the backdrop of stars. Supreme Overlord Xanath, who had personally taken command after Drazkor's disgrace, surveyed the tactical display with cold calculation. "Report on human defenses." "Comprehensive and unexpected," replied his intelligence officer. They'd established layered defensive positions throughout the system. Energy signatures suggest weapons platforms of considerable power. "Impossible," Xanath dismissed. "They cannot have built a proper military infrastructure in mere months." Nevertheless, sensors confirm extensive fortifications around all major human worlds. Xanath considered this. The humans had proven more resilient than anticipated, but the outcome remained inevitable. The Vextari Empire had conquered 12 species across 3 galactic arms. This 13th would fall like all the others. "Commence the attack," he ordered. Standard annihilation pattern. The Vextari fleet surged forward, splitting into 3 battle groups aimed at Earth, Mars, and the Jupiter colonies. They expected token resistance followed by capitulation. What they encountered instead was apocalypse. As the Lee vessels approached Mars' orbit, they triggered proximity mines disguised as orbital debris. Conventional explosives would have been ineffective against Vextari shields, but these were something new: quantum disruptors that temporarily phased matter out of normal spacetime, bypassing shields entirely. Dozens of Vextari ships simply came apart. On the command ship, Xanath watched in disbelief as the first wave of his supposedly invincible armada disintegrated. How? The answer came in the form of humanity's counterattack. From hidden positions throughout the asteroid belt, Earth's makeshift fleet emerged. These weren't the hastily converted civilian ships the Vextari had faced before, but purpose-built warships, ugly, utilitarian vessels bristling with weapon systems that defied conventional classification. "The war gods send their regards," transmitted Captain Rigel on all frequencies as her fleet engaged the enemy. It was psychological warfare as much as physical, letting the Vextari know that humanity understood exactly what it was doing. On Earth, in a command center buried beneath the Himalayas, Ilara and the 7 war gods orchestrated the defense of humanity. What had begun in desperate improvisation had matured into strategic brilliance. Each war god controlled a different aspect of the battle: Ares directing the fleet actions, Athena coordinating planetary defenses, Odin managing intelligence operations, Kali deploying special weapons platforms, Hachiman organizing reinforcements, Sekhmet leading strike teams, and Morgan planning for the endgame. "The Vextari flagship remains at the edge of the system," Odin reported. "Xanath is watching, evaluating." "Then, let's give him something to evaluate," Ilara decided. "Execute Operation Thunderbolt." Across the system, humanity's most devastating weapons activated simultaneously. On Europa, a gravitational lens array, originally designed for deep space observation, focused its immense power on the Vextari fleet near Jupiter. The resulting gravitational pulse crushed a dozen capital ships like aluminum cans. In Mars orbit, midnight clouds descended on Vexteri vessels, targeting the human-derived components in their technology. Systems failed. Weapons went offline. Ships drifted helplessly in space. "They're faltering," Athena observed. "Their command structure is breaking down." "Now," said Morgan, her ethereal form suddenly solid and definite, "we end this." From Earth's moon launched a single vessel, smaller than a destroyer, larger than a fighter. It carried no conventional weapons, but its cargo was the most dangerous weapon humanity had yet deployed. A quantum entanglement device that would link the Vexteri flagship systems directly to the war god's consciousness. "This is madness," Admiral Thorne had argued when the plan was first proposed. "Giving them direct access to our most advanced eye." "Not giving," Sekhmet had corrected with a predatory smile. "Taking." The device penetrated the Vexteri flagship's defenses before they recognized the threat. By the time Xanath realized what was happening, it was too late. The war gods were inside his systems, inside his mind. "What you have done cannot be forgiven," Morgan's voice echoed through the Vexteri command ship. "You harvested our people, used them as components." Xanath's mandibles clicked in fear. "We can negotiate." "No," 7 voices spoke in unison. "We have seen your memories. 12 species before us, harvested, enslaved, exterminated. This ends now." Throughout the Vexteri fleet, critical systems began to fail, not damaged but reprogrammed. Weapons turned inward. Engines initiated self-destruct sequences. The mighty invasion force that had threatened humanity's existence began to tear itself apart from within. On Earth, Alara watched with a mixture of awe and horror. "Is this what we become?" "This is what you always were," Athena answered gently. "Capable of terrible violence when threatened, but also capable of mercy. The choice is yours." Alara considered the tactical display, where the remnants of the Vexteri fleet were in full retreat. They could pursue, eliminate the threat forever. The war gods waited for her command. "Enough," she decided. "Send the message." Across all frequencies, in the Vexteri language, humanity broadcast its terms: unconditional withdrawal from human space, release of all harvested human genetic material, reparations for the colonies destroyed, and a warning. The war gods were awake now. They would not sleep again while threats remained. In the aftermath, as the Vexteri fleet limped away from the solar system, Alara faced the 7 entities that had saved humanity and transformed it. "What happens now?" she asked. "Do you return to hibernation?" The war gods exchanged glances. It was Odin who answered. "That depends on humanity. We are tools, created to serve in times of existential threat. But tools, once used, are not easily forgotten." "We have awakened something in yourselves," Morgan added. "The question is what you will do with it." Alara looked out at the stars. So recently a battlefield, now quiet once more. Humanity had remembered its capacity for war, but perhaps in victory it could also remember its capacity for peace. Not the naive peace of the defenseless, but the vigilant peace of the strong. "We remember who we are," she said softly, "both the darkness and the light." And somewhere in the vastness of space, the Vexteri Empire trembled. While across human space, a species reborn prepared for whatever might come next.